All right, welcome to episode one of the Herm Cet Show. We're talking about the NBA draft. I'm here, Nate Herman, with my boy Ethan Seton. Starting off, E, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to be on the show.
Yeah,
Happy to get it kicked off.
yeah,
This is really exciting. I've been looking forward to this.
it's a great time to start it off. You can't get better than the NBA draft. I'm always hyped.
Oh, absolutely. We've been preparing for this show for a while now.
That's
We've
true.
known each other for a few years.
That's true.
So so we've been locked in, gaining all the knowledge, ready to
Yeah,
fill the viewers with insight.
that's right. Well, I think most people would probably argue that the draft started at two. The intrigue was there at two because everybody knows who was going number one. But I thought we'd start off just talking about number one and Victor Wembanyama, who looked very happy to go to the Spurs. And I just want to try to get some insight on what you think that looks like in year one. What do you think the Spurs are going to be? A lot of people trying to say he's going to be an all-star in year one, kind of lofty. The Spurs as a playoff team, I don't really see it, but just interested in what you think of them.
Right now, there's a lot of hype around the Spurs, and I think it's deserved
Mm-hmm.
because, Wembayama is a generational talent. And, looking at what he could do with San Antonio, I think the ceiling for them this upcoming year might be the playing game. I see them maybe getting like an 8th through 10th seed
Mm-hmm.
if all goes well and he stays healthy. I think that's my biggest concern, him staying like healthy. He's 220 pounds right now, 230.
Yep.
So him staying healthy, him playing over 70 games, I see them slotting into maybe a play-in game. So there is a lot of potential with this Spurs lineup. Trey Jones is a really good young point guard. Hopefully, the connection between him and Wemby is going to be something that will provide some, offense and some wins this season.
I think you pair the best coach of all time with one of the best prospects of all time, and you have a pretty good combo. But I'm thinking probably somewhere from 35 to 45 wins. I don't think they're going to be a team that's going to put up 50 wins. I think on the low end, you're probably looking at a team that's about the 12th seed in the West, is somewhere on the lower, kind of middle of the outside of the play in there. But on the high end, I think you could look at a team that's maybe like somewhere from the 7th to 10th seed in the Western Conference. I think that's what you're looking at. It depends on what they do in free agency because they're going to have a lot of money. Whether they try to go after Brook Lopez, who I really like as a kind of other guy to help guard the big men, so you can kind of treat Victor more as a roamer, like you've seen the Celtics do with Robert Williams and the Heat do with Bam. But I think Jeremy Sohan is the perfect teammate for him as a guy who can really set him up, play a lot of defense, and just do a lot of the dirty work. But my guess is that they're probably not a great playoff team. But if you're looking at Victor, it's probably 18 and 10 off the start, and somewhere from 3 to 4 blocks a game. I think the blocks are going to be very high from right off the jump.
I actually have a question for you about Victor that I was thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Bleacher Report has been really high on his ball handling,
Oh,
and they've been constantly saying, "Oh, look at his guard play. He's a guard, basically."
yeah.
How often do you think are the Spurs and Popovich going to let him, take the ball up the court and handle the ball?
I
That's
don't think
something
it'll be
that
that
is going to
often.
be
I
interesting.
think they'll let it happen sometimes, but you have some good ball handlers already. You have Trey Jones. You have
Yeah.
Jeremy Sohan, who can play some point forward, some Draymond-esque type of skills. And Devin Vassell, I think, has some interesting ball handling capabilities if you want to run Vassell there. But obviously, Victor's your guy. But if you want to kind of bring him along slowly and maybe not expose him, just because of how high he's dribbling the ball to the ground because of his height, I think it's going to be easier to poke steals. So you put him against NBA defense. I think in some ways that might make it a little more difficult. The highlights look good. It's all tight space. He's got three guys on him and he's going behind his back. But you put NBA defenders there, I just don't see that going down
And
that way.
a lot of those guys that he's playing against, you look at the highlights,
Hmm.
there's no true like centers going against him. Like
No.
sometimes you'll see an occasional like, 6'10" guy
Hmm.
guarding him. A lot of those guys are like 6'5s and below. And
Yeah.
it's easy to say, "Oh man, he just threads his way through the defense."
Hmm.
It's kind of simple when they're all 6'3". You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, well,
Yeah.
I'm
It's an easy
interested to see how
mismatch.
he goes up against, like real centers. Like when he has to go up against Steven Adams, if they're going to switch off of him, or put him on an actual like power forward or something rather than, Steven Adams and Rudy Gobert,
Yeah.
that type deal.
I mean, I'm very interested if you put a big, long defender on him with some size. If you throw Evan Mobley at him, if you throw Jaren Jackson Jr. on him, some guys that can guard the perimeter but also are strong and physical, I think that could give him some problems just because it's so much different from what he's used to. Those 6'10 guys you're talking about in the French league, the LNB, they're kind of immobile. They're not super agile, big guys. That's just not something you're seeing with them. So I think it'll be a big change. But everybody knows what Wemby's going to give you. So let's get into some other winners. You want to start it off? You're the first guest here, so I'll give it to you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
This is a controversial take, but I'm saying that at number 2, I'm saying Brandon Miller and the Charlotte Hornets. They're winning with that pick.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, they wanted to see Scoot getting taken at 2.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at a lot of the fan base from Charlotte on social media in the past few hours, and it's all been, sell the team again, pack our bags. The fan base is moving.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think that, Brandon Miller is going to provide an instant impact. People had doubts about LaMelo Ball coming in.
Yep.
And I kind of see the same thing with Brandon Miller. He's going to go there and he is going to provide that impact, and he's going to grow on people. In the interview that they had on stage
Yep.
with his parents, his dad said this quote, and it kind of like stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
He said, like, once they get to know my son, they're going to fall in love with him.
Yep.
And personally, I think people are going to see when he starts, dropping 15, 20 points a game in the first, few months he's there. I think all is going to go well for them.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people have argued that between Brandon Miller and Scoot Henderson, it's just a fit versus talent thing, fit versus best player available. Although I think a lot of NBA GMs, that people may not know this, I think a lot of them think Brandon Miller is the better player. Do you think it's just because of fit that you like it, or do you actually think Brandon Miller might be the best player available on the board at that point?
I think he has like a Paul George type ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
With Scoot, there's a lot of question marks, regarding his offense, regarding his shooting ability. With Brandon Miller, I mean, we see a guy who can shoot the ball well, and, he can get to the rim. I think he is, possibly one of the best players in the draft. If Victor Wembanyama was not in this draft, I could argue him going 1.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to stick with that because he's going to slot into that Charlotte Hornets rotation. Him, LaMelo Ball, Gordon Hayward, PJ Washington, hopefully getting re-signed. I think that there's some fit right there. And things can go off the Charlotte Hornets if Brandon Miller slots in with LaMelo Ball.
I think when you're looking at it, you got to try to see what they already have. They have some interesting guys. I mean, they have Miles Bridges coming back, most likely. I think Miles Bridges will probably be back on the team. And then all of a sudden, maybe the Hornets are a little better than people expected because all of a sudden they have LaMelo. They might bring back Terry Rozier. Then you have Brandon Miller and Miles Bridges at the forwards. You have 2 very good forwards. You have a young center in Mark Williams, who's already one of the better rim-protecting centers in the league, I'd argue, as a guy who's only about 19 years old. It is a very young player still. But there's things to be had there, and I think there's arguments you can have, or maybe Scoot is the better player. But when you're looking at guys that come around more often, I think it's a lot more rare that you get a 6'9" guy who can shoot the ball like he does, can play defense like he does, and play handle or have a handle like he has, than it is to find an explosive 6'2" guard. I think you're going to find more explosive 6'2" guards than you're going to find 6'9" all-around do-it-all guys. And I think that would be the argument, although I think Scoot's ceiling is probably higher. If you're looking at him as a more efficient Russell Westbrook, then all of a sudden you got, one of the best point guards in the league very quickly. but there are some legitimate concerns, but there are arguments to both sides. So let's just get into the next winner, and I'm going to take this one. And I think the Rockets are huge winners. I think it depends on how you view Amen Thompson at number 4. But Cam Whitmore at number 20, a guy who I would kind of undisputably rank as a top 5 player in this class. There are a lot of people that argue that he had bad workouts, that he had bad interviews, but to me the talent is there. So getting 2 guys that you can fill into your rotation right away as a point guard in Amen Thompson and a small forward in Cam Whitmore, I think kind of fills out the rebuild that the Rockets have. They have about $60 million in cap space, which is a lot, so they might try to bring some guys in. But they could try to bring in these young guys and just run it with them, because all of a sudden you have a good young prospect at each position. You can run Amen and Jalen Green in the backcourt, and then Cam Whitmore, Jabari Smith Jr., and Alperen Şengün in the front court, with a new head coach in Ime Udoka, who has kind of outperformed expectations in other places. And it just feels like a team that is a lot better set up than they were entering the draft today.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Ime Udoka. I think he's a culture changer.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, I do think that the Rockets with Cam Whitmore, pulled off a good pick there. They snagged him.
Yep.
But I guess my question for you is, how will they all fit together? Because we saw a very isolated Rockets team last year. No real leadership from the players. Very young, obviously. And I'm just curious on your thoughts on how they're all going to mesh together, under Udoka.
I think he's going to prioritize defense pretty quickly. He's been a good defensive coach, and he has some guys that can be good defenders. I think that's going to be the biggest step for him. But I think the shooting is going to be a legitimate concern when you bring these guys together. Jalen Green has some inefficiency issues, and both Amen Thompson and Cam Whitmore would be guys who you argue are maybe okay shooters, but have some questionable upside to how good of shooters they can be. Şengün as a center probably isn't going to stretch the floor, can hit in the mid-range. So if you're looking at reliable shooters, you're kind of just looking at Jabari there. So you have to bring players in, I think. I think there has to be some sort of steady point guard presence. If they could have got someone like Tyus Jones, I would have been very happy for them on a different team now. But just kind of a steady presence to kind of calm them down. Because I think Amen Thompson is a guy who can be a point guard, but maybe right now isn't a point guard. It's something that he's going to have to work on. Is a pretty good playmaker, but just doesn't have a ton of experience against high-level competition. In terms of NBA defenses, and the point guard there might be tough. But if you look at guys like maybe Fred VanVleet as someone they could bring in free agency, I don't think this Rockets team is going to be some super competitive team. But I think next year you're probably looking just for more personal growth from guys, and guys taking big steps. So Tari Eason is a guy who I really like, is someone who's probably kind of underrated as a bench piece. They have KPJ as a backup, and I like him much more as a sixth man than I like him as a starting point guard. So I think there are some positives there, but there are a lot of questions that the Rockets still have that don't just go away because they hired a new coach and had a pretty decent draft.
Yeah, I see them hanging around maybe the 13th, the 12th seed.
Mm-hmm.
That's my best guess for them.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see Green continue to grow and become that reliable everyday scorer and that everyday playmaker, because I think his growth, him continuing to grow as a player on the court, is going to help them get more wins run, in a few years down the line as they add more veteran assets. So I definitely see them around the 13th to the 12th seed.
I think they can be very reminiscent of the Pistons from Cade's rookie year, where maybe you're in a lot of games, but you're not necessarily winning a lot of games, where you're not necessarily getting blown out all the time, but you're not racking up wins left and right. So maybe they're more competitive than they've been in years past, but I don't think they're going to be a play-in team. I think it's probably unrealistic in terms of what you're going to see for a jump from them. Do you have a second winner you want to get into?
This one, we've been a fan for years. We've watched the games. We go to the same college, Houghton University,
That's
represent. Right. And, we've spent so much time in our dorm rooms watching this young man ball out. And there's going to be some haters, but Jaime Jaquez Jr. and the Miami Heat are winners of this draft. Jaime, we can't say enough. The dude can ball. The dude can score, and he's a good defender too. We see him get on the perimeter, make defensive plays, and can make the pass when he needs to. But Jaime Jaquez Jr., he's been at UCLA for years. We've seen him win some big games. He's a winner. And I think the Miami Heat, it's one of those glove fits because Miami Heat, they take in these guys. You're like, who are they? And a lot of people in the comment section recently, they're like, who is this guy? We haven't seen him. We've done our research. We've watched the games for the past few years. Jaime Jaquez Jr., he'll find a way. Spoelstra always finds a way down in Miami. And I think Jaime Jaquez Jr., with his scoring and just with his winning mentality and his winning pass, is going to help the Miami Heat take another step forward.
I think when you think of the so-called Heat culture, you're looking at high-effort guys. You're looking at guys that work really hard. First guy in the gym, last guy out. And I think that kind of embodies who Jaime Jaquez is. As a guy who immediately after he gets drafted, they're showing tape on the television of him diving on the floor for balls, getting out there, throwing his body around. And I think his time at UCLA will be really impactful for what he does in the NBA because he played so many roles there. He came in as a guy who was just kind of a role player. I don't believe he started first year right away. Was a guy who kind of came along slowly as a do-it-all, hard work gadget guy, and left UCLA as a very good scorer, was their primary option, and was the Pac-12 Player of the Year last year. There's a lot of growth from Jaquez, and feels like one of those veteran guys who maybe can just step in and make an impact right away. I don't think you're looking at a Desmond Bane level of production early on from him like we saw a couple of years ago, but I think in terms of players like Christian Brown, I think that's totally realistic for Jaquez as someone who just might not be a star for you, but is going to be a star in his role and do exactly what you ask of him, especially with Lowry kind of aging out. I think getting that playmaking in different places is going to really help what they do. All right.
Yeah, I like that.
Yep. Well, we can get into what I think the last winner is, and I'm going to talk about the Jazz. I really like what the Jazz did. I think they did it in a couple of different spots. Slotting in Taylor Hendricks as a shooter and defender between Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler, I think is the perfect fit between them in terms of balancing the two, as not hurting your spacing but also not hurting your defense. He does both things really well. I think he's probably mostly just going to be a 3-and-D level guy. I don't think you're expecting a guy like him to break out offensively into a 20-point-per-game scorer, but I don't think he has to. I think he's one of those players, a lot like Jaden McDaniels in Minnesota, who can set the tone for you defensively on the wing, guard guys probably 2 through 4, and then hit some shots for you as well. They also got Keontae George at pick number 16, a guy who I really like as a bucket, kind of that prototypical smaller guard who may not do a ton of things for you, but he's going to put the ball in the basket, very similar to guys like Cam Thomas, Jaden Hardy, even Bradley Beal on a higher level. And I think with Jordan Clarkson hitting free agency, I think getting someone like Keontae George is super valuable on a cheap contract and something that I really like. And then they added another bucket towards the end of the first round with pick number 28 in Bryce Sensabaugh out of Ohio State. Shot over 40% from 3 last year. His per 40 numbers was almost 30 points per game. Was just a guy who, when he was out there, he was scoring the ball. Most people didn't expect him to be a one-and-done athlete, but just came on the scene and immediately was a high-level contributor for an Ohio State team that wasn't super good, but he was a bright spot for them that I really liked. And I think they address multiple different areas that can help them continue to grow from the kind of surprising season we saw from them last year.
Yeah, we saw Lauri Markkanen have an unbelievable season. I don't know if anyone was really expecting that from him. And he erupted. And you pointed out the Jazz, they're grabbing the Infinity Stones. They continue to grab the assets. Yeah. And they picked up some guys. And I don't know right now if the Jazz are a contender, if they can contend for a championship. Do they go out and can they afford to get somebody in free agency to help them take another step closer? What are your thoughts?
I would have loved a point guard for them. I think a point guard would have been super helpful. You trade away Mike Conley at the deadline. They're reportedly listening on a guy like Colin Sexton, who was okay for them, but coming off an injury, wasn't quite the same guy we saw in Cleveland. Getting a playmaker for them, I think, could be huge. They don't have a ton of money, so it's probably going to be someone on sort of a cheaper deal. Whoever that's going to be, someone that kind of overachieved on a smaller contract. Maybe someone like Gabe Vincent is someone who they could look into, but just someone who's probably not a star point guard right now, but someone that they could have got. With 3 picks, I would have liked the idea of maybe trading up, taking someone like Anthony Black as someone who I think could have been a great distributor for you and made some of your other guys better. But outside of the point guard position, I think they've done a really good job at building up the roster. But in terms of what you're looking at to do in the offseason, I think point guard has to be kind of the number one priority here. Unless you're going to try to play Clarkson at point guard, which I just don't see being super effective.
I really loved, back in the day when they had Ricky Rubio as their point guard. What a veteran presence, and you see his impact wherever he goes, whether he's on, the Cavaliers, the Suns, the Timberwolves.
Yep.
He's provided an impact, and I just think that, you go out and you get a veteran point guard, and that'll just bring forth the young core that they're grabbing in the draft. And, even they let go Mike Conley, and he did the same thing.
Yeah.
So I think they are, one veteran away from taking another step forward and becoming a contender, building around Laurie.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's fair to have full faith in them because Danny Ainge has proven once and again that he's one of the best general managers in the league. He just makes good moves, he makes smart decisions, and he wins trades. So I think whatever you're going to do, you're going to look at getting a point guard in there, but I'm sure he has a plan for that. How frisky do you think they get with upside? Do you think D'Lo is an option for them? Do you like D'Lo for them, or does that concern you a little bit?
You know how I feel about D'Lo, as a
Hey,
LeBron guy, as a Lakers,
he's a roller coaster.
man. He's like the ex-girlfriend that just keeps on calling but then
Yeah.
ignores you for 3 weeks. You never know what you're gonna get.
Uh,
Because, someday you'll get ice in your veins, D'Lo, and he's going to
yeah.
give you 25, and you're going to tell yourself, D'Lo's back. D'Lo's rolling.
Yeah.
And then the next day, 0 for 9. But don't worry, because he's putting shots up after the game, and then it gives you hope that tomorrow he'll come out and he'll give you 20. But, some days D'Lo's there, some days he isn't. So I don't know if they want to, roll the dice on D'Lo. I don't know if any team should really want to roll the dice on D'Lo unless we're back in like 2018 on the We Go Hard Nets back when he was a bucket.
Yeah.
But I don't. You know what? I'm not going to make the decision for the Jazz on D'Angelo Russell. I'm not going to make any decision for any team on D'Angelo Russell.
He's a tough guy for me to read because I don't think he's going to get a bag, but I don't think he's going to get the minimum either. He feels like a guy who probably goes to a team that's kind of competitive on some sort of mid-level or taxpayer mid-level, somewhere from $7 to $12 million, which the Jazz could offer him. And if you're a team that can convince him to kind of focus on being a playmaker again, I think you can actually get some really good value. But if he's going to take the shots that he's going to take, it's going to be hard to swallow. But coming out of Ohio State, the passing was phenomenal. You saw full court bounce passes in college he was making that were dimes. But that D'Lo might be gone. Who knows where that D'Lo has gone? But speaking of D'Lo, let's talk about losers. Getting into to your first loser. I know you got some hot takes here you want to spit out, so you give me some.
Yes, I do, and this might be able to connect with the Utah Jazz situation, but brace yourselves. At the number 6 overall pick, Anthony Black and the Orlando Magic. Now, I'm calling them a loser just because of the roster. Anthony Black is a phenomenal point guard. I think he's going to do great things in Orlando. But that leaves Jalen Suggs, Cole Anthony, and Anthony Black all fighting for a spot.
Yeah.
And you got Markelle Fultz in there as well, like emerging. So, one of them's got to go. And you can't have all of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that, it's a loss because Magic, those four names that I just mentioned, all can contribute if they were on, any team. If they were on four different teams, they'd contribute.
Mhm.
Since they're all on one team, you can't find a spot for all of them. So I think one of them's going to have to go, making it a loss because you're giving up something valuable. And maybe the Utah Jazz can find a spot for, if you want to go get Jalen Suggs, maybe. You want to go get Cole Anthony. Because I'm a big Cole Anthony guy, as we talked about before.
Yeah.
His off-season workout videos, unlike Ben Simmons, because I know my boy Cole Anthony is putting in the work. He's got bunnies, and he's gonna have a consistent jump shot this upcoming season. Don't sleep on Cole Anthony, and hopefully, if the Magic get rid of him, I hope he goes to a team, he puts up 20 a night, and then they'll realize it was a loss.
I'm trying to gauge how serious you are. I really can't read you because I feel like Cole Anthony is just worse Jordan Poole. That's how I feel about
Absolutely
Cole
not. Jordan Poole should be playing in the Bahama Basketball League with Hassan Whiteside at this point. Do not disrespect my boy Cole Anthony like that.
His efficiency is bad. He's a guy who likes to take tough shots, and he's not a guy who historically makes tough shots. So at some point that becomes an issue. But just as a read here, Anthony Black is undoubtedly, at worst, the second best player of those four, right?
Yeah, I give or take.
Fultz is one. Fultz is one.
Fultz is, yeah, sure.
Okay, I think Anthony
I'm
Black.
not a big Suggs guy.
That's fine. Anthony Black, at worst, I feel like is their second best guard at that rotation.
Three.
No one is taking Cole Anthony over Anthony Black.
Rome wasn't built in a day, Nate. Rome wasn't built in a day. Cole Anthony is just.
Has he been there 3 years now?
2020. Yeah, 2020 was when he got picked.
Yeah, so he's been there 3 years now. And Rome wasn't
like
built in a day, but it wasn't built in 20 centuries either. So at some point, maybe say, hey, this guy's not it. But totally could be a guy in another situation you see break out with more opportunity. I think to a certain extent there's a problem with a logjam there, and there's been a problem with a logjam there for years. And we saw that with Mikal Bridges. He's not Mikal Bridges, but Mikal is a guy who is kind of held back by the shot attempts from Devin Booker, from Chris Paul, from even DeAndre Ayton, and you get them in a different scenario, it can really work out. So there are definitely situations where maybe Cole Anthony's great, but I like the Anthony Black pick. I think he's a great player.
I think the Anthony Black pick, I think he's a phenomenal player.
Mm-hmm.
Like I mentioned earlier, the log jam. That's the Orlando Magic. It's in the Orlando Magic's hands now.
I'll actually, I'll hop on the bandwagon here with you because I don't like the Magic pick at 11. I do not like Jet Howard at 11. Jet Howard is a guy who I think consistently over the past month or so was mocked in the 20s, and to take him at 11 I think feels like somewhat of a reach, especially when there are guys who I'd say are more sound shooters on the board, whether it be Grady Dick, whether it be Jordan Hawkins, who both went pretty shortly after him. I think there are other options who are probably a little safer, and most people you would have asked, if you asked them before the night, probably Kobe Buffkin was going to be the first Michigan player off the board. He was not. It was Jet Howard, and I think to some extent, like Cole Anthony, it's because of his father.
We've seen a lot of controversial things with his father.
Yeah.
But we saw the interview after he got drafted. He's a hard worker. He's gonna listen because listening is a skill that you learn. Yeah. And so, maybe he's gonna grow, and that's what we'll give him going into the Orlando Magic down in Orlando, Florida. Who knows what'll happen down there.
To be fair, this is not a Magic hate cast right now. I like the Magic young core. I think we should put that out there. Paolo and Franz are both great. I like both of Paolo and Franz. Sneaky little bowl aspect out there. But the Magic have a good young roster. I think they're building it the right way. But in certain aspects...
around Cole Anthony.
In certain aspects, maybe they make wrong decisions at times. But Jonathan Isaac is a guy who I will continue to think is going to be good. if he can ever stay on the floor. So when he's on the floor, even the 20 games he played this year, he was like a top 10 defender in the league when he was out there, because that's what he does, and he does it well, and he does a very good job at it. But after, I critiqued you for saying that the logjam was a problem, I'm going to go in with another loser and say the Trailblazers are a loser, because I think the logjam is bad. I love Scoot Henderson. Scoot Henderson, to me, is the second best player in this draft class. I think it's inarguable he's the second best player in this draft class, just because of the upside and the athleticism and the strength. He's built like a linebacker. But the fit with Portland is not good. It's not what you want to see. Unless it signals a Dame trade, which I would be very in favor in. I think they have a really good young core. I think they are pretty well set up for a rebuild, especially if they trade Dame. Getting good young pieces back, getting draft picks back, I think could be extremely valuable, considering Shaedon Sharpe, who is one of the higher upside players in the league if he can reach it. But Scoot and Shaedon Sharpe is very interesting. I like the two of them, but to have 3 point guards in Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons, and Damian Lillard, I think is going to hinder Scoot's development, and because of that, I don't like it. I also think there were trades that were there. I think if you wanted to, you could have traded out. I don't know if Zion was actually available. I think there's probably a chance he wasn't. But I think if you offered it up for Brandon Ingram, if you offered it up for Pascal Siakam, and if you gave it up for Paul George with some other stuff in there, I think you could have gotten a star next to Dame, and they chose not to do it, and they chose to stay at the pick.
No, there is a big log jam in Portland, and I personally believe that there is going to be a trade within the next few weeks. I don't know if you want to go, big man, if you want to pair up Dame with like a legit center instead of Yusuf Nurkic, because I'm kind of getting sick and tired of watching Damian Lillard play with Yusuf Nurkic.
He was so
after
good
all
pre-injury.
These years.
He was so good pre-injury.
I
It's not coming back. But he was so
It's
good
not coming back.
pre-injury.
You can't hold on to the past forever, my man.
That's true.
And I think it's time for Portland to pack Yusuf Nurkic's bags and send him away. And you can go out and get Pascal Siakam. That would be okay. I'm okay with that. I think Damian Lillard would be okay with that too. But I think that you'd have to give up also like Anthony Simons, and that would be a loss for the Trailblazers because he has shown his potential. He's so young and he is so athletic, and
future all-star.
He's gonna. You stole the words out of my mouth. He's gonna be an all-star someday.
Yeah.
But you're gonna have to give that up to get Dame with somebody, and so he doesn't have to pass the ball to Yusuf Nurkic anymore.
Yeah. I made a video about it already. I think trading Anthony Simons would be a mistake. He averaged like 22 or 23 last year, and when Damian Lillard wasn't playing, Anthony Simons averaged 28 points on almost 50, 40, 90. The dude is a bucket.
No, we watched some of the games together. It was unbelievable.
Dame light is what I would call him. And when you have a 24-year-old in Anthony Simons, who is going to be a player like Dame, and you have Dame who's 33, I think it's pretty clear who you should move off of. I don't actually think it's that hard of a decision. But if they want to stay competitive, I think there are interesting centers they could target. If they could legitimately get DeAndre Ayton, I would at least try to do that. I think he's an interesting piece for them. But if you want to look cheaper, I think someone like Clint Capella could be really cool for them, just as a great rebounder and a good pick-and-roll guy. Maybe Steven Adams is available. Maybe the Grizzlies think Jaren Jackson can be their center long-term. So it depends on what other teams want to do. But there will be centers out there if they want to legit try to go big.
Yeah, I've seen Jaren Jackson Jr. play in person at center when Steven Adams was out, and he's very capable of running center, and I mean one of the best shot blockers in the league statistically. So maybe if you could get rid of Steven Adams and just put Steven Adams on the Blazers, and I think Dame would love to have a real center like Steven Adams running pick and rolls with him.
Yeah. As much as I think the Scoot pick is kind of questionable, I think the pick of Chris Murray in the 20s is a phenomenal pick for them. I actually really like that pick. I think starting Nasir Little at the 4 a lot of times last year, it's just not going to work. So getting someone like Chris Murray in there, who isn't quite the shooter his brother Keegan is, but offers a lot of the other intangibles. I think it'd be nice. But do you have any other losers that you want to talk about specifically?
You know, I've thought about this. I didn't write down any more losers,
Mm-hmm.
but the more I was thinking, I really, looking at anyone who had a pick from 10 to 20 that didn't snag Cam Whitmore, I think is a loser
I couldn't
because
believe it.
I was shocked seeing him fall.
Mm-hmm.
People on social media, I know I keep referring to social media, but I've been on it,
That's right. We're tapped in.
recently. Yeah, we're tapped in. We're locked
Yeah,
in
that's right.
on the
Exactly.
draft today,
Yeah.
doing our research. And the people were saying, well, I guess he's going to have to learn, download Duolingo because he's going to be speaking Chinese in
Yep.
the Chinese Basketball Association because he's not going to get picked. And finally he got snagged, the Rockets, but no, Lakers. The Lakers could have gotten him. But,
I was hoping.
they did. Yeah, fingers crossed. I'm wearing my Lakers sweatshirt right now.
Yeah.
And the Lakers did snag a point guard, but I think that those teams, they did pass up on a gem, so making them slight losers hypothetically.
Yeah. I mean, I missed on a winner. I feel like I want to talk about the Mavs a little bit because I like what the Mavs
Sure.
did. I think getting off of Bertans' contract, I think, is a win. And I think getting a center in Derek Lively, who was the number one recruit in the country going into the season, I like it for them. He's a great rebounder. He's a good shot blocker and just gives them things that they need. They weren't big enough last year. That was a huge problem for them after the Kyrie trade. They weren't big enough at all. And they also took Olivier Maxence Prosper, the dude out of Marquette, in the 20s. They traded up to get him. And a good defensive wing has been kind of compared to like a PJ Tucker type. And after losing Dorian Finney-Smith, they just needed the defense. Was something they needed pretty badly. And getting size and defense, as well as moving off the contract of Bertans, give yourself some money, about $20 million, to actually do something in free agency, I think is a huge win for the Mavs, and we would be amiss if we didn't talk about it.
Yeah, Lively, definitely a stud,
Mm-hmm.
and I think he's going to do fantastic things. Do you think that they need to add another, star player, or do you just surround Luka and Kyrie with a bunch of role players this offseason? What is your thoughts, going in the next few weeks for the Mavs?
I think you go in on rotation. It depends on what you think you can do. If you can get Chris Middleton on kind of a cheaper deal to play your small forward, I would 100% do that. As a guy that surprisingly opted out of the last year of his contract at about $40 million, I thought for sure he would opt in coming off of the season that he had last year. But it looks like he wants more long-term security than anything else. So maybe he'd take a deal for 4 years, $100 million, something like that. $25 million instead of the 40 that he was going to get before on the current year of his contract. More money in the long term. If you can do that, a guy whose defense has probably slipped a little bit, but is still going to give you a lot offensively, I think you make a move like that to get that. But just adding another wing, whether it's a high-level guy like that or not, I like the idea of doing that for them and just getting more defense and shooting. Because I think as much as I've liked Tim Hardaway Jr. at times, he can also be kind of frustrating because the offense is up and down and the defense just isn't really there. So getting another guy in the wing, I think, is what they have to do.
Yeah, surrounding, Luka and Kyrie with a couple more shooters, I think would be ideal because, Tim Hardaway Jr. some days he can give you, 6 3-pointers, and then other days you might as well just, stay in the locker room. So adding a couple more, I think, would be ideal
Yeah.
for Dallas moving forward.
Okay. Let's get into some trades. There's been a lot of trades over the past few days. I don't necessarily want to talk about Beal. I think the Beal one's been kind of talked to death. I think we're far enough past Beal that we don't have to talk about it. But I think the Porzingis one is super interesting. So I'm curious if you think this makes them like more legitimate title contenders, or if this is going to be something that hurts them, because undoubtedly Marcus Smart was the heart and soul of this team. He had been there for 9 years. He'd played there since he got drafted. But I think also it's undoubtedly true that Porzingis at this point is a better player than Marcus Smart. So it's a trade-off there.
I see Kristaps Porzingis as a guy who, can take over if Tatum goes down, Brown goes down. I think Porzingis, we've seen flashes of him in Washington
Hmm.
and, back when he was on the Knicks, even in Dallas. Like there was just times where I'm like, wow, like he deserved to be, a top pick. Like he's he's phenomenal.
Yeah.
But I think this does make Boston better.
Hmm.
I've been, Holy takes minutes off of, Grant Williams because yeah,
Free
I'm
agent
over
Grant
Grant
Williams, kind
Williams.
of low key. Hope they don't
Yeah,
bring him back, Grant
I
Williams.
don't.
But
I hope like that's so Boston. Yes, you have won. You have brought in. If you would have told a Boston fan like 2 weeks ago, hey, you want to have Kristaps Porzingis or Grant Williams playing for you next season, I think 99 out of 100 would
yeah.
say Kristaps Porzingis because I the
So
the season of Grant Williams is over. So Kristaps Porzingis, he's going to be able to shoot for them, and I
hmm
think he's also going to have an interior presence. Defense is going to be huge.
yeah.
Hopefully, he provides a spark defensively for them that you're losing with Marcus Smart. But I see this as a good fit for Boston, even with Al Horford being a 7-footer in the paint as well. I think it'll be okay.
I think it makes them even more versatile than they were already because they can run a lot of different lineups now. They had guards. Guard is kind of where they could afford to get rid of somebody, and maybe they needed another big because Al Horford probably just isn't going to play the same minutes he's been playing. He's getting into his upper 30s. It just feels unlikely that there's not a drop off coming at some point. And Robert Williams has been hurt kind of a lot. So just to have more kind of ability there and more guys to have, I think is valuable. But you could run a kind of Twin Towers lineup with Porzingis and Rob Williams, or Porzingis and Al Horford. Or if you want to run Porzingis as your lone big man, you can run Brogdon and Derek White out there. Derek White was the Celtics' third best player in this playoff run. I think that's pretty clear. He was great for them. He just does a lot of things for you. And I think it gives them a lot of different things that they can do. Whether you want to prioritize shooting, which Missoula has shown that he wants to do, or you want to prioritize rim protection and defense against maybe an Embiid or a Giannis and just throw more guys at them. If you have Porzingis and Rob in the paint waiting for those guys, I think it's going to be a lot better chance at stopping them than maybe what they already had.
Well, we have some breaking news
Oh, do we?
on, the show right now as the Cleveland Cavaliers have selected Amani Bates.
I love that for them,
And we
actually.
we were we were waiting for this pick for a while now. We've been keeping our eyes on this pick.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Amani Bates going to the Cavs? I know we're on the trade segment, but just for a quick minute because we both were waiting for this.
No, that's okay. We can talk about it. I love Amani Bates. I think he's a guy with super high offensive upside as someone who can really create shots for himself. And coincidentally enough, I think that's exactly what the Cavs needed. They're running out guys like Isaac Okoro, Karis LeVert, Lamar Stevens at the small forward. You just need a guy in there. And Amani Bates, at I believe about 6'10", he's a big dude. He's very capable, kind of a Kevin Durant disciple. I think he's not going to reach that, but to get a guy in like the late 40s, right, 49, who has all-star upside, I think is phenomenal value. I can't get over that. I love the fit because they needed a small forward, and I think they got a good offensive one with Amani Bates.
Yeah, I think he's gonna go great in that Cavs rotation.
Mm-hmm.
Around Cedi Osman, the All Star. I'm just kidding. Uh, Jarrett Allen, and you know, just having guys like Darius Garland pair up with Amani Bates, I think it's going to be exciting because it's going to be
Yeah.
explosive, it's going to be fast, and hopefully perimeter defense is at an all-time high. And we'll see what happens with that. I'm excited to talk about that moving forward.
Yeah, I think if you run the pairing of Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, offense and shooting is always going to be kind of a bit of a concern. But if you can throw out there Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, and Amani Bates, I think that's about the best you're going to get in terms of trying to balance the two. If I was a betting man, which maybe I've been in the past, I would suggest that they trade. I would bet on that they trade Jarrett Allen at some point. I just think that's likely. Whether that's this year or next year, I think that'll probably happen because the offensive stuff is limiting, but the defense stuff is some of the best defense in the league when they run those two guys together. So it's interesting to see what they'll do, but I really like Amani Bates for them as someone who I think can fill some of their shooting and scoring. Yeah.
Well, moving forward in the trades,
We can talk about
talking
Marcus
about,
Smart. Do you like that? I love that for Memphis.
I think that's exciting. They gave up one of my favorite players, Tyus
Yeah,
Jones,
best
because of
backup point
it.
guard in the league.
I, I've been on the Tyus Jones fan
Hmm.
train since his days at Duke and back when he got drafted by Minnesota. So he's one of the most efficient point guards in the league with his assist to turnover ratio. And yeah, I'm dropping
Yeah,
stats
the
out here,
analytics are
guys.
coming out. I was gonna
Yeah,
make a
the
joke about
analytics
that.
are
The assist to turnover ratio.
the assist to turnover ratio, one of the best in the league, and he got more minutes this past season, and guess what? It didn't get worse. His efficiency stayed the same. And
Hmm.
so I think that they are giving up something, but John Morant, he's gone for 25 games. He was a bad boy,
Hmm.
and so you got to find someone to fill in the slot, and they said, "Hey, Marcus Smart, we're giving you a shot here because we've been wanting you for a few years now." And like, like I said, I think he'll be fine going in for those 25 games starting, and then he might even start moving forward from there, depending on how things go for them.
I think they'll start him at the two. Would be my guess. We've seen him run at the two before, whether it be alongside Kemba Walker, alongside Kyrie Irving. He's been along some star point guards in Boston and has played the two before. He wasn't really a point guard until the last couple seasons, so I think he can do that well. But he can also run the point guard for those first 25 games, and then after that, I think you're probably pushing Desmond Bain to the three, whoever you want to run at the four, and then maybe Jaren at the five, or you could still go Jaren at the four and Steven Adams at the five. But if you're looking to replace Dylan Brooks as that guy that's a annoying defender who nobody likes, Marcus Smart is a great guy to do that. He also feels very similar to Tony Allen to me, as a guy who's kind of that grit and grind definition of Memphis type of guy, and I think he's going to be a good fit on their team. And the defensive pairing of him and Jaren Jackson Jr., if Smart can get back to his Defensive Player of the Year level, they now have the reigning two Defensive Player of the Years. So we'll see how they work together, but I'm really intrigued by it. And I think it could be interesting, at the very least.
Yeah, it definitely. I think we'll have to talk more about it once we see,
Mm-hmm.
how the first 10 games go with Memphis,
Yeah.
with Smart kind of running things, and or if they put the ball in Bain's hands,
Mm-hmm.
most of the time. We'll see. I'm interested, so we'll have to follow up on that.
They're going to need another guard. I think that's pretty clear still, especially if Ja's going to miss all that time. Losing Tyus Jones in the deal, I think, is going to hurt. I think you're going to need
Yeah.
another guard, another playmaker, because as much as Smart has worked on it, he's still not a phenomenal playmaker. So it's something he needs to work on, and
Well,
something that
Tyus
he can
Jones now
fix.
gets his shot in Washington. I think that's gonna be exciting to see. He's
Yeah.
gonna get his full-time starting point guard spot in Washington,
Oh, he's gonna
and
he's gonna have to
what
battle it out with Monte Morris.
I don't think Monte Morris is a real threat right now for Tyus Jones. Gonna be
When you
honest,
look
but and,
at great backup point guards with great assist to turnover ratios, trying to be starters on new teams, I think Monte Morris and Tyus Jones are almost the same person. So in some ways, it's going to be a back and forth, but one of those two dudes is going to be very unhappy on the Wizards next season.
yeah, and there will be games. I'm sure both of them will get opportunities to start
Hmm.
because this Washington team is just going to kind of be sent out to, sell $2 tickets and go out and win 10 games and hopefully get the number one overall pick in next year's draft.
Hmm.
But getting to see isolation ball, freelance offense with Tyus Jones running the show, Denny Avnia kind of trailing and hitting up in the corner with Corey Kispert.
Yeah.
I think Tyus Jones is going to average around 7 assists a game
Hmm.
and scoring. Hopefully, he puts up maybe 12 points if he had a 12-7 season, big standing ovation for Tyus Jones this upcoming year.
Do you like him or his brother better? You probably like Tyus better, right? Trey Jones is
Oh,
nice. He's younger, but Tyus is probably the better player, right?
I've been a Tyus Jones fan since day one. I watched Tyus Jones
Uh-huh.
play when he was on Memphis. I went to was the Staples Center.
Yep.
I watched him play the Clippers. There was nobody at that game because Kawhi played like 4 minutes because he was rehabbing. Paul George didn't play. Nobody played.
Yeah.
So I watched a 40-point blowout with Tyus Jones running the show, and every single time he shot a free throw, I was that one dude that was up on my feet
Yeah.
cheering Tyus Jones on. So if Tyus Jones ever sees a Herm Cet Show, just know, Tyus, I got your back, my man.
Yeah, Seth is a big fan, a big Tyus guy.
Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely.
He's Tyus ride or die. But the Wizards are the ones making all the trades. So we can get into the second trade I want to talk about here, which is the Jordan Poole Chris Paul trade. I hate it for the Warriors. I think this is a dumb trade for the Warriors. If you're telling me I'm giving up Jordan Poole for 38-year-old Chris Paul, I would have hung up the phone if I was the GM. It's a move that Bob Myers would not have made. I can tell you that for a fact. Mike Dunleavy Jr. in his first move as GM trades his most valuable piece for a 38-year-old point guard. And that's tough for me to swallow.
Cleveland Cavaliers. So that was right. That was during Lob City Clippers.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Mike Dunleavy Jr., he took a break. He kind of like turned off basketball for a while. And then he woke up 8 years later and he's like, oh, Chris Paul's available. Like, we got to go get him.
Yeah.
And now here we are. Chris Paul, he woke up in 2015 and he thinks he's still there.
Hey,
And
if you
we
really
have Chris
want to
Paul
play,
and
yeah, you go ahead.
I was just going to say we have Chris Paul running slow show with the maniacs Steph Curry and Klay Thompson running around him. So I have no idea how that offense is. Steve Kerr's got his work cut out for him.
Oh, he does.
And Chris Paul hates Steve Kerr. Like, where does the fit?
It's not.
I saw
fair.
I saw an
The fit is
interview
kinda
earlier
confusing.
today. I saw like this raggedy iPhone interview. I have no idea how they like found Chris Paul. It looks like they found him in a janitor's closet. He's so distraught.
Okay.
And they were asking him. They're like, "What are your thoughts on this?" And he's staring at the camera. He's like, "I'm really excited. Things are good. Obviously, I'm really excited. Things are going to be great."
Yeah.
And he's like, he was being held at gunpoint to say that. So I have no idea. Like he's going through an emotional roller coaster right now, and Steve Kerr probably is too. So
Yeah, it brings back that meme of Chris Paul fake laughing along with Steve Kerr and then immediately
exactly.
stopping as soon as he walks away. The fit will be confusing, but if you want to play devil's advocate, I guess you can say every team that Chris Paul has gone to has gotten better. Is that a point where that declines? I think probably Chris Paul going to the Thunder like 3 years ago isn't the same as Chris Paul going to the Warriors now, especially because the Warriors have an established system that have a way that they do things, and it's just not what Chris Paul does. But we've never seen Steph Curry play with a real traditional point guard outside of maybe Sean Livingston, but that was a different point in Livingston's career, I'd say. So I don't think that we've ever seen it before, but is a guy who could thrive in pick and roll if you want to do that with Steph Curry. But I think in some ways it's going to limit what Curry can do, but there are also people that would argue that Curry could bring the best out of Steph. So it's going to be interesting to see, especially if they bring Draymond back, because he takes the ball out of Draymond's hands. Are you going to put a 22% three-point shooter in the corner? Is that their offense? I don't understand what their offense would be.
I think this is going to come down to ego. If he's going to pull a Carmelo Anthony and refuse to come off the bench.
And, he will, yeah.
Because I remember, I think it was with OKC when Carmelo went to OKC and they asked him in the interview. He said, "Oh, like, are you like open to coming off the bench in your rotation. He's like, this guy wants to make me come off the bench. You hear that? Like total ego like check right there.
Yeah.
And I think he's gonna have to think about that too, because I saw a projected lineup,
Mm-hmm.
and it was Chris Paul, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andrew Wiggins, and Draymond Green, all like 6'7" and below.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's giving me EuroLeague Wembanyama opponents
Yeah.
flashbacks right there. Uh, they can't run that small ball. Like Looney's not gonna get kicked out of that lineup. They need him in there.
Underrated
And
too. Looney's great.
yes, like, and you bring Draymond back, or I mean,
I don't think
they're
you
gonna
can.
sign.
I don't understand how it works.
There's this spot. This is what we're talking about. There's that spot that I mean, I don't know how you fill it. Like one of y'all has to come off the bench, and I don't think it's gonna be Kevon Looney. So
The problem is that this kind of straps them from getting any better. It almost feels like, in a way, this is their last swing with Steph Curry. We're going to get you another championship, and we're going to give you 38-year-old Chris Paul. Because their best asset is gone. The only other real thing that they can do to try to get a trade done is attach something to Kuminga. But with what they've played Kuminga in terms of minutes, I just don't see a team giving up a ton of assets to get him. I just think that's unrealistic. So in terms of the ability to improve this team, I don't know if it's really there. And it's going to be very difficult because of where they are money-wise. They have no space at all. They're way over the luxury tax. And it could get kind of dark and gloomy here for the Warriors as Steph kind of ends his crescendo of his career.
well, I mean, they still do have the superstar Vermont Catamount Anthony Lamb balling out on their roster, so that is their
You mean
clinging hope.
accused rapist Anthony Lamb? Is that who you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about the
Space the
legend
floor.
in March Madness,
Uh-huh.
American East Player of the Year, Anthony Lamb,
Yeah.
Vermont Catamount up,
Warriors fans hate that dude.
represent. But he still gives them buckets occasionally during garbage time.
Him
So,
and
I've watched
Ty
Anthony Lamb
Jerome.
for years. I have personally, courtside yelled at Anthony Lamb at the free throw line as he has
Yeah.
torn down my Binghamton University Bearcats. For years,
Yeah,
I
he's that
sat
guy.
courtside in the event center in Binghamton, New York, and watched Anthony Lamb terrorize the Binghamton Bearcats. But now I'm a fan though. He made it, like he made it out the American East. He made it out the trenches. So
All right, let's
yeah,
flip the
random
trade to the other
tangent there.
side. Yeah, let's flip it to the other side for a second. Jordan Poole is going to put up 30 shots a game on this Wizards team. The amount of offense that he's going to be allowed to do is going to be ridiculous. I think there's a legitimate chance he puts up to 30, 30, 30. 30 points per game, 30% from the field, and 30 shots a night. It's something that we've never seen before, and I think that that's a thing that could happen because they want to be bad, and they're going to let him take as many shots as he wants.
I'm not mentally prepared for watching this Wizards team and watching Jordan Poole, pull up from half court and not get like ridiculed
Yeah,
for it.
yanked out of the
Like
game.
he's going to be able to take whatever shots he wants, like you said.
Yes.
He's going to be able to run whatever offense. He's going to be crossover, step back
Hmm.
with 20 on the shot clock. And, it's going to be like Kobe Bryant's final game every single game, putting up 50
Yeah.
shots a night from anywhere. And
You're,
it doesn't matter if they go in or not, because if he drops 40 points a game, the five are going to be up. Are going to be
yeah. I mean, I think it reminds me a lot of what we thought we might get with Colin Sexton last year. When Colin Sexton got traded to the Jazz, people are saying this dude is going to average 40 points a game because we have no idea how many shots Colin Sexton is going to get, and he's going to love to shoot them up. But it ended up being Lowry, who was the guy who broke out for them. But a lot of people thought it might be Sexton. So maybe it's not Jordan Poole. Maybe we're going to see a Denny Avdia breakout. I would love to see. I love my boy Denny. I'd love to see him break out over there.
Yeah, I love Denny too. I mentioned Denny earlier. I hope Denny starts shooting the ball more because he's a good shooter. I just think, he's gonna get some more shots now because Kyle Kuzma's not ball hogging in Washington anymore.
Yeah.
So, I Tyus Jones breakout, Denny Avnia breakout, and Jordan Poole. I'm not gonna come up with a breakout word for him, but he's gonna be able to put up some shots.
It's going to be a pool party every single night. And nobody's going to be watching. The games will not be on national television. But if you have League Pass, it might be fun to check in on Jordan Poole's shenanigans every once in a while. And I want to talk about one last trade with the Wizards as well. Trading up one pick to get Bilal Koulibaly at number 7, Victor Wembanyama's teammate out of France. They give up a couple second-round picks to do it. It's not a huge package, but the Pacers, they go back one spot. They take Jarris Walker, who I would argue they were going to take anyway, and they get 2 second-round picks. So I like it for the Pacers. I think if you're the Wizards, I'm not sure why you needed to do that. I think he would have been there at pick 8, unless you were really worried about someone jumping you. But with all the offensive guys they have now on the team, I'm really interested to see what a defensive wing like him could look like on this Wizards squad. And maybe it's not the best situation for his development, but I'll be interested to see what he looks like over there.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of upside, a lot of potential,
Mm-hmm.
and we've seen him grow. Like he grew almost like a foot in the past 2 years,
Yeah.
which was kind of crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that he's going to be able to go out there and grow in this free offense. Go out. Doesn't matter if you guys win. Just go out and grow. And I think we'll see some growing pains maybe translating in because he's in this kind of system that doesn't really fit anything right now.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of potential, like all-star level potential here if it turns out right.
Yeah, I mean, in one season, the dude went from basically the JV team over there in France to one of the most important players on the second best team in the French league. So it was a big jump from him. There's definitely a lot of upside there. And Jarris Walker, I think, is the perfect fit for Indiana. They were running Aaron Nesmith at power forward last year a lot of the times. And if we're being honest with ourselves, Nesmith is a shooting guard. So that's not what you want. But getting a big body power forward like Jarris Walker, I think is exactly what you want for Indiana on the flip. And getting a couple second round picks, I think why not do that?
Yeah, getting players in the right position, just adding a lot of strength into that lineup. Having Nesmith and Duarte actually play guard positions is going to actually be valuable for the Pacers.
Yeah.
And so Walker, he'll go in there, he'll use his strength. He's going to, fit into that role right away that the Pacers have for him. I'm not too sure his usage exactly. I'm curious to see if they have him start right away.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think we'll see moving forward how he fits, but I like that pick.
Yeah, they might take it slow, like we saw last year with Benedict Mathurin. Didn't start him, despite him being one of the best performing rookies in the class. The coach there, Rick Carlisle, seems to have no problem with bringing rookies off the bench. So we could see that, but I think the Pacers are a team to watch next year. I think they could be a little better than people expect them to be. Considering last season they were in the playoffs before Tyrese Halliburton went down with that injury. So if you bring in a couple guys who could be valuable to you, I think the Pacers could be pretty good as soon as next season because that's the level of elevator that Halliburton is for that team. Yeah. You want to get into fun fits? Guys you like? Where they went?
Oh, absolutely. I have one fun fit that really stood out to me, and it's been like the name that just keeps on popping up, and some people love it, some people don't. But Grady Dick to Toronto, You
Yeah.
know, he wore the red suit today and he got selected by the Raptors. It was
Hmm.
fate, and it found its way. Grady Dick is headed up to Toronto, and I think that's just right now. Toronto is trying to, find itself. Once it's like when you go out there and you fail the math test,
Yep.
and you're just sitting there. You're like, what is life? Like, how am I such a failure? I think that's kind of Toronto right now,
Hmm.
losing Fred Van Fleet and just kind of like watching, everybody leave after you won a championship a couple years ago. They're trying to find themselves again. And maybe Grady Dick is that guy,
Yep.
comes in and just brings that energy again. And like we saw Austin Reeves. Austin Reeves just ignited
Yep.
Lakers Nation.
That's
He's
right.
just that random guy that ignited Lakers Nation. And maybe the Toronto Raptors found something.
Do you think it's something that'll clash with someone like Gary Trent Jr.? Is someone who could be kind of redundant with what Grady Dick does?
I think Grady Dick is athletic and he has energy. Gary Trent Jr. is he's a fun shooter. He's a fun guy to watch play. We've watched him play a
Hmm.
decent amount,
Yep.
and hopefully that Grady Dick will continue to develop his offensive game, and he can become a stronger defender, I
Hmm.
think. And you know, if he could, I think him and possibly OG Anunoby, if he can play alongside him,
Yep.
increase his defensive abilities,
Hmm.
I, I see him starting games potentially.
Yeah, just feels like a guy that the Raptors like. Is a guy who's a little tall for his position, is pretty big to play shooting guard, and just kind of fits what the identity they've built. And they need more shooting, so I think it's something that's very valuable to them. I'm gonna cheat on my first fun fit, and I'm gonna give you two guys to the same team. And I like what the Hornets did at the back end of the first and early second. They took Nick Smith Jr. at the end of the first round, and they took Amari Bailey later in the second round. Two guys who were high upside guys, two guys who were both seen very highly coming out of high school. Amari Bailey, known because Drake dated his mother, but also is a very good basketball player on top of that. But they failed, I would say, with James Bouknight. It just feels like that's probably not going to work out at this point. I think that was somewhat of a disappointment. And if you didn't get Scoot Henderson, that's okay. Because you have some depth now, you have some other guys who can play guard for you and give you some valuable guard minutes off the bench. They don't have to sign Isaiah Thomas again to whatever that may be. But Terry Rozier feels like a guy who's probably going to get traded at some point within the next year or so, whether it be this offseason or during the year. Has played well for them, but just feels like maybe a guy who isn't long for Charlotte based on what they're doing. So two young guys who I think have high upside at guard. I really like them doing that, considering the recent failures they've had in the draft with kind of similar guys.
Yeah, I like Nick Smith Jr.
Hmm.
I think he has a lot of potential. My concern with him is him, he didn't play a lot of games at Arkansas this
Yep.
past year. Dealing with injuries.
Hmm.
Can he continue, can he gain that athleticism that he had, back when he was in high school and before the injury? Because really athletic guard, just want to see him bounce back from those injuries and, reach that full potential with the athleticism
Hmm.
to, provide for that Hornets team.
Yeah, I mean, if you think you're going to tie yourself to a LaMelo Ball, Nick Smith Jr. backcourt, it's a lot of injury concern. It just is with both guys, especially after seeing what's happened to Lonzo. It just feels like the shoes there might have been an issue in the past that kind of have played a part in both of their careers so far. But LaMelo has been a little more lucky with the injuries. I think a lot of LaMelo's injuries are kind of fluky, where Lonzo's are more severe kind of stuff, where maybe LaMelo just slips his foot wrong or something. And I don't know if it's necessarily a concern with him, but if you have two guys that are going to be injury concerns in the backcourt, maybe that's somewhat of an issue. But I think if you're late first round, early second round, you might as well take a swing on upside while it's there.
I personally own big baller brand stuff. I don't own the shoes, but I own the socks. So
Yeah,
I cannot say that it's the big baller brand,
yeah,
apparel that's causing these injuries because I've worn those socks for years now
you
and
know,
they provide baller status. big baller brand results. But yeah, injuries are a concern for LaMelo and
Hmm.
Nick Smith Jr., but I think that they can work through them, and I want to see, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and I think if they both stay healthy, things will go well.
Yeah. Uh, I don't know. I don't have a ton of more fun fits. I think there are guys that are interesting. Whether it's Case and Wallace at 10 to the Thunder, a guy who's a good defensive guy, pesky, gets steals, on top of being a pretty good mid range shooter. So you kind of build yourself that archetype there. And it kind of echoes what you're already looking at with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I don't think he's going to be that level of scorer, but I think a lot of the base skills are kind of similar. And if you're the Thunder and you think eventually, because of all the CBA, you're going to have to pay all these guys a lot of money, and it's going to be hard for you to do that. Maybe you move off Lou Dort, and then you just have another good young defensive guard in Case and Wallace. And if you run out SGA and Wallace, and then Giddy and J Dub, and Chet Holmgren, they have a good young core there. There's a lot of interesting things that they can do. And I never doubt what Sam Presti does because I think he has a pretty good track record at this point of interesting players.
Yeah, I like that. I think that, you know, we'll have to we'll have to see in the upcoming days if there are any more trades that kind of bring together or move, other people that were just selected. But, right now as the draft fizzles out and, we kind of see the rosters being put into place,
Mhm.
I think there are a lot of, good fits and that there are also some questionable fits like we've talked about.
For sure. Final thoughts wise, as we kind of wrap it up here, uh, there were a lot of trades kind of talked about before the draft that could potentially go down. And once again, as we see year in and year out, not as many trades as maybe you'd think. But overall, I'd say it was still an exciting draft. And just, what did you think about it?
I think that there was a lot of interesting things that happened.
Mm-hmm.
There was some there were some players that fell, like Cam Whitmore. You always have that guy that falls.
Yeah.
And, there was the hype around the top three. Who was going to go second?
Mm-hmm.
We saw Brandon Miller, get snagged at two, and it was also the question of how, who was going to snag the gem of Amani Bates in the second round.
Yeah.
And the Cleveland Cavaliers, they took a chance.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of good stories in this draft, and it's just going to be the question of, all right, these guys in the summer league now, or who gets moved in the next few days. So a lot of things still to let play out.
Yeah, I think there is some pretty good talent at the top in terms of the top 3 or 5 guys. Some guys who have pretty clear star upside. But in terms of just looking at the draft overall, I think it's a lot better kind of role player rotational draft than we usually see. I think a lot of these guys, even into the second round, can be players that can contribute right away. And I think due to that, the summer league is going to be super interesting. You're going to have a lot of cool matchups, and you're going to have a really interesting battles from time to time. We'll see what rookies from last year come back, because that's kind of up and down at times. Probably Paolo's not playing, guys like that. But just to see Walker Kessler and Hendricks play, maybe you see a cool defensive kind of flash there or something like that. But we'll see what happens, and I'm excited to see a couple matchups there, especially Miller versus Scoot in the summer league. I know they're going to set that up.
Yeah, that'll be exciting. Definitely looking forward to the summer league. I've already been thinking about it in my head. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all I got for today. I think we'll probably come back next week if we have the time. Maybe do a little free agency preview before we get into free agency. Look at what some teams could do and some cool stuff there. But that's going to be it for the first episode here. Thanks for watching. Think about subscribing. Do you have anything you want to shout out, brother?
Man, thank you for, letting me be on the first episode of the Herm Cet Show.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm Ethan Sutton. I'm one of Nate's friends from college.
Mm-hmm.
I play on the Houghton University baseball team, play semi-professional baseball for the Genesee Rapids. And, you can follow me on Instagram at esetton2hh. And, make sure you subscribe to the Herm24. Yeah. Let's get it.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe sometime we'll have a third guest on.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
we'll get a special guest or something, and then we'll be set.
It'll be great. Hey, make sure. Hey, the show is just starting. We're gonna
Yeah.
keep this rolling.
Keep on keeping on. All right, well, thank you guys for watching. That's going to be it for us today. You guys have a good rest of your day. Peace.